And just from what you've seen and in your own experience, do you think that we're going to have any? Can you sort of predict any emerging trends that we'll see on our screens this year and next year? And how do you think the pandemic has kind of influenced writing?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily someone who works in commissioning or maybe know a bit more about trends, but for me, I think I see a lot of experimentations with tone, which to me is really exciting. I think because there are a lot of shows, lots of brilliant shows out there, things that sort of come at things from a slightly sidewards direction feel like they cut through, and I find that really fun personally. I think there's a lot of experimentation in story format. So there was, a received wisdom of comedy is roughly half an hour and drama is an hour. You've seen a lot more attempts at pushing to something like a half an hour slot for a drama or something closer to that, but spanning more episodes. So I think that's a useful thing to understand when you're developing a spec, is to go, actually the shape of the way we tell stories is shifting a little bit, and that can be exciting. I think there's like there's like a Nick Hornby series which is like 10 by 10 minutes, which you probably won't get away with to start off with, but yeah, so I think there's a real variation in tone and real variation in story shape. I think there's a lot of work that's trying to grasp what the future is going to look like. I think there's, the last few years, there's been a real pull towards sci-fi, a lot of it dystopian, and I think that's relatively understandable. But I think I detect, maybe this is just because it's what I'm really interested in, I detect a sort of trend for stories that are looking at how there's a place for healing or difference or change there, as opposed to everything is going to be awful forever. I think that's interesting. I don't know what the pandemic will do for the stories people tell. I do know I have tried to, it is really funny whenever I'm pitching a new idea or a variation of something we're developing, I'm like, oh yeah, that's just because I've just been stuck inside for a long time. That's why I think that's a really compelling idea. I'm working on a Chekhov adaptation. One of my plays is a Chekhov, and I just remember, and sorry, I know this is not television specific, but I just remember when I was younger, or when I first seen my first Chekhov plays, I was like, I don't get this. Everyone's just inside and bored all the time. They can't get anywhere. I can't relate to this at all. And now I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. I totally get it now. So that has actually helped me write that with feeling and gusto.
Great advice. And finally, any advice for our writers who are going to be submitting for the TV Pilot competition? Any kind of advice you'd give them? So I say this from my own discoveries and failures, so hopefully it'll be useful to you. Don't try and do too much in the pilot episode. I think there is a real temptation to go, I've had all these brilliant ideas and these wonderful characters, and I need you to understand them all here because it's the only shot I'm going to get. What you want to do is prioritize the story that's going to be the driver of your series. I would try and craft an episode that is reflective of what the series will be week to week, or however it goes out, because I think there is a temptation to make a very jazzy, exciting pilot, and then actually the series isn't like that at all. And so something that's an example of what the audience should expect going forward is really useful. You don't have to, there's that advice about having characters that are relatable, and of course it's never about that. It's about characters that are compelling. Yeah. And I think what makes things compelling is understanding what that person cares about, and the thing that they care about could be incredibly niche. And I think that's a really exciting thing about television at the moment, is that you can find something that sounds on the surface very dull or very, very specific, but actually that specificity is a real strength, because I think people love being immersed in specific worlds that are different from their own, especially nowadays. It's a bit like traveling without having to go there, because you can't. So I would push myself to be as specific as possible. I would push myself to be as clear as possible. I would push myself to not throw everything at it for the sake of demonstrating the work. Just stick to what is the story here that people are going to come back to week to week.